Hello everybody. So today we're going to be talking about nouns and adjectives in Spanish. Nouns, as we briefly mentioned last time, are words that you can use to refer to persons, animals, places, or things. It can also be used to refer to ideas like love or intelligence, so let's keep that in mind. But for now, let's stay with our definition that it refers to persons, animals, places, or things. Now, there is something that is very difficult sometimes for people that start with English as their first language to understand, and is that in Spanish we have genders for everything. So every noun that you can think of will have either a masculine or a feminine gender assigned to it. And in the cases of living things, such as people, animals, the gender will usually be whatever the natural gender or preferred gender of the person in some cases is. So in the case, for example, of an astronaut, like we see here, it'll be la astronauta, feminine, if it's a female, and it'll be el astronauta if it's male. Same thing in the case of the cat. If it's a male cat, it'll be el gato. If it's a female cat, it'll be la gata. Now, in the case of things that don't have gender naturally, for example, as a house or a car or a table, you may look at it and think, well, there's nothing really that makes that house female or feminine, but that house is in fact what we consider a feminine noun. How can you tell with most verbs, with most words like that? To be honest, it's mostly memory. And it's really funny because in other languages that also have genders, such as French, the genders will not be the same. So it's not like house, for some reason, is always assigned a female gender. It may be a different gender in other languages. This is the case, for example, with milk. So if you know any French, you know that milk is le lait, which is masculine, but in Spanish it's la leche, which is feminine. So really there is no logical way around it. It's just mostly memory. Okay? One way to check, if you're not sure, is to check a dictionary, but there are some hints that you can use. So the first one is to look at the determiner. So what is a determiner? A determiner is this word, this word right here. La, las, el, los. Okay? So the determiner is a word that's in front of the noun, usually introduces the noun. And in English, you may know it, for example, as the table, the ball, the girls. So this is the determiner. Pardon my writing. The determiner, okay? And that will allow you to tell if it's a masculine or a feminine noun. If it's la or las, it's feminine. And if it's el or los, it's masculine. Now, keep in mind, and this is important, notice that the determiner for el does not have the accent that the pronoun that we saw last week has. So el as in he will have an accent, but the determiner el as in el gato doesn't have an accent. So keep that in mind and don't confuse the two. Another clue that you can use to determine whether a noun is masculine or feminine is the ending of the word itself. So as you can tell, most of the time, and this is almost all of the time, a feminine noun will end in A, as in la mesa, la pelota, las niñas. And a masculine noun will have endings in O, such as escritorio, niños. But you can see right here, it doesn't always work out. So the best thing that you can do if you do have a doubt is to check the dictionary or to check for clues in the context of the sentence. So in this case, we can tell that because it has el, again, that'll help you determine that it's a masculine noun. Okay, so now let's look more closely at two types of determiners that we have right here. So we're going to focus on the types of determiners. So the two kinds of determiners we're going to be talking about are definite and indefinite determiners. So in the case of the best way to picture the difference between these two and to kind of keep it straight for me is to think of the situation where you have a teacher who comes into the classroom and asks for a student. So if the teacher comes into the classroom and says, I need a volunteer, then it's an indefinite determiner, right? So she'll say, I need a volunteer. In this case, it doesn't matter who the volunteer student is. It can be anybody from the class, whoever puts their hand up the fastest, for instance. But if the teacher comes into the classroom, same situation, and says, I need the volunteer, you immediately can picture that there is a student somewhere in the class, a specific person in the class who has already volunteered, and the teacher is just here to pick them up. Okay, so let's look at the definite and indefinite determiners in Spanish. So in Spanish, we have the following definite determiners. We have el, la, los, las. And in English, that's the equivalent of the, or the. And then in Spanish, we have indefinite determiners, which are un, una, unos, unas. And these translate to a, an, or some. Okay? So, keep in mind as well that, again, although using the determiner to determine the gender of the noun will help most of the time, if you see something such as los right here, you might have a little bit of trouble with this one because los can also be used for a group of mixed people. So if I say los estudiantes, I could be referring to a group of students that are all male, so all the boys in the class, or I could be referring to the group of students in general, to the entire class. So los estudiantes de la clase, and that could include girls in there. So you might need to use other clues within the context of the sentence to determine whether it's a female or a male noun. I should say feminine or masculine noun. That makes more sense. So what are some clues? So we said we can use the determiners in the sentence, and we said that we can use the ending of the word if it ends in A or O, but we also said that that's not always the most foolproof way of doing it. Another clue that you can use is using other words in the sentence. So for example, if there's an adjective, the thing with Spanish and nouns and adjectives is that adjectives are going to have to agree as well, or to match the noun in gender and number. So if you have a noun, again, such as, let's look at this one right here, la casa, because it's feminine and singular, so there's only one house, the adjective, whatever adjective I put here, needs to be feminine and singular as well. If I had las casas, you would have a noun that is feminine and plural, and then you will have an adjective as well that is feminine and plural. Okay, so let's look at some adjectives and how to form adjectives, how to use adjectives, and that'll help you have a better idea as well of how to determine whether a noun is masculine or feminine. Okay, so if you want to take a break right now after having looked at everything that has to do with determiners and nouns, feel free to pause the video and come back later. If not, I'm just going to roll into the explanation about adjectives. So what are adjectives? Adjectives are words that give you more information about the noun or about whatever it is you're talking about. So adjectives in Spanish are used to describe the word, and they have to, as we just mentioned now, they have to agree in gender and number with the word, i.e. the noun they are describing. Okay, so again, going back to our example of the house, if I say, sorry, let me get a better pen here. There we go. If I go back to the example of the house and I say la casa bonita, notice that my adjective also ends in A, and thus my determiner, my noun, and my adjective are all feminine and singular. Okay? So if I had a masculine or a masculine noun, such as, for instance, el carro, which is a car, el carro bonito. Okay, so you're going to have el carro bonito. Again, notice that you have the determiner, the noun, and the adjective all matching up to be masculine and singular. Okay, now if I wanted to make it plural, same thing. So in this case, I'm going to have to change the determiner there and go for los carros bonitos. So I have to add an S in every single position. Los carros bonitos. And now you have a masculine plural construction. Now, same thing here. If I wanted to say las casas bonitas, again, I have to add an S in every single part of the sentence. And that's why there's so many clues in Spanish to help you out with determining the gender of the noun. Okay. Something else that's important is that, unlike in English, most Spanish adjectives go after the noun. So, what do I mean by that? You might have never really even thought about it, but in English you would say the pretty house, right? So you have the adjective before the noun. But in Spanish, you would have, like we just had just now, la casa bonita, where the adjective goes after the noun. And that happens most of the time, although we do have some exceptions. So there are some exceptions where you will find an adjective in Spanish going before the verb. And right now we're going to be talking just about two. One is adjectives about admiration. So that would be the example of a great writer, which in Spanish would be un gran escritor. In that case, the adjective goes right before the noun. Or, for example, also you can say something like a good man, un buen hombre. Now, you can also have adjectives that go before the noun in Spanish in cases where the adjectives that will actually change meaning based on the placement. So this is, for example, I'll give you two examples, and don't worry about knowing all of them, because again, this will be memory based. So I'm just going to give you two right now that you should remember. And one is the idea of the adjective for viejo. If I say un viejo amigo, that's an old friend, right? Like, I've known this person for a long time and we are old friends, okay? But if I say un amigo viejo, now that's in the meaning of my friend is old. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake there. An old friend. So this would be the case of a friend that's old. So an old, aged friend. Another one will be, for example, the case of pobre, which means poor. And poor actually has the same double meaning in English, kind of. So if I say una persona pobre, that is a poor person, meaning they don't have a lot of money. But if I say una pobre persona, in that case, I am referring to feeling some kind of pity or feeling bad for the person, like, oh, the poor person. You know? So it means the exact same thing, I guess, in English, but it gets translated the same in English, but it does have that double meaning, and depending on where you put it in Spanish, it will change meaning. So if you put it after, you're referring to the lack of money. If you put it before, you're referring to having some kind of pity or some kind of a person that maybe has had some disgraces happen to them. Now, let's look at how we pluralize things, because we didn't really talk about this, and it's the same for nouns and adjectives, so that's why I left it till now. So if you have a word, either a noun or an adjective, that ends in a vowel, such as casa, such as perro, or even astronauta, astronauta, you can pluralize it or make it plural simply by adding an S at the end. Nice and simple. Or even inteligente, intelligent. There you go. If you have a word that ends in a, and you have an example here, let me not forget about that. So if you have a vowel like tierno as well, which is cute, you just add an S and you pluralize it. If you have a word that ends in a consonant, now to pluralize that, you need to add an E and an S at the end. Okay? So for example, in the case right here, tiburones, sharks. The singular for that, so a shark is tiburón, un tiburón. How would I pluralize that? By adding an E and an S at the end. Okay? Same thing with the adjective joven, which means young. To pluralize it, I don't just add an S, I need an E and an S at the end for jóvenes. So tiburones, jóvenes. Something else that I should mention before I forget again is that while all nouns have genders, so you have casas being feminine, perro being masculine, astronauts, well, that'll depend on the astronaut, whether they are female or male. But then you will have some adjectives where it doesn't vary according to gender. So for example, in the case of intelligent, inteligente, you'll see that the singular form will actually end in an E. And if it ends in an E, or in the case of jóvenes, where it ends in an N, these two adjectives, they don't need to change to match gender. These can be used for either masculine or feminine nouns. So you can say una niña inteligente, or you can say un niño inteligente. And they both work fine for both feminine and masculine nouns. So if you have an adjective that ends in an E or an N, so basically in anything other than an A or an O, then you don't need to change anything. You only need to worry about adjectives that end in A or O. Okay, and guys, well, that's the last of it for this week's video on grammar about nouns and adjectives in Spanish. So if you finished watching this video, now you can move on to the vocab section. It is kind of heavy, so I advise that you take it little bits at a time. So don't try to memorize it all at once. Take little bits at a time. And if you have any questions, of course, you can contact me. Have a great week, and see you guys soon.